That low hum of worry about American democracy, it's kind of hard to ignore, isn't it? It feels like you can't open an article or listen to a news report without experts warning us about its future, how fragile it is. Sometimes even saying, it might break down in the next few years. There's this undeniable sense of anxiety, but also you feel this real passion from people who genuinely want to protect it. But here's what I've been pondering. How do you truly defend something like democracy when maybe the core justifications feel a bit forgotten? It's like trying to shore up a foundation without quite remembering what it was built to support in the first place. And that's precisely what we're diving into today. We're going to try and rediscover a powerful, maybe even overlooked intellectual defense for liberal democracy. We're pulling from a really fantastic and very timely recent Vox article by Sigal Samuel. It's titled, "How to Save Democracy, Value Pluralism is America's Best Defense." So our mission here is to unpack this concept, value pluralism, and understand why the article argues it's America's strongest defense for its liberal democracy. Consider this your shortcut to getting up to speed on this absolutely crucial topic.
Yeah.
With some surprising insights along the way. I think it's kind of remarkable when you think about it. This country, 249th birthday coming up? And for so long, Americans have largely, taken democracy for granted. It was just there. But now, like you were saying, experts are sounding these alarm bells, warning U.S. democracy might break down soon, like in the next 3 years. It certainly got people's attention. And with these alarms ringing, it feels crucial to understand why. Why is America's liberal democracy facing this level of scrutiny right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What we've seen, I'd say, over the past decade or so is this fascinating and frankly deeply concerning development. You have intellectuals from both the left and the right actually launching pretty significant attacks on America's liberal democracy. And just so we're clear on terms, when we say liberal democracy, we're talking about a system defined by, free, fair, multi-party elections, robust civil liberties, and equality before the law. That's the baseline.
Okay.
So the critiques, they come from starkly different angles. From the left, the argument often centers on liberalism's economic vision. The idea is that its emphasis on individual freedom can feed exploitation and inequality. They argue it neglects to tackle collective problems effectively. Too much focus on the individual, maybe.
Right, at the expense of the community.
Exactly. Then, from the right, the criticism is more about liberalism's focus on secularism and individual rights. The argument there is that this focus undermines traditional values and social cohesion, leads to a kind of fragmented society.
Okay, different angles, but is there a common thread?
There is. The common thread, across both sides really, is the belief that liberalism's core premise is wrong. That premise being basically that the government's main job is to defend the freedom of the individual to choose their own path in life. Both critiques fundamentally question that.
And, to be fair, liberalism does have its challenges. We've seen rising inequality, a sense of social disconnection. Those are real problems, and they've definitely given these arguments from both sides some traction. So the big question becomes, given these challenges, is liberal democracy still defensible, or should we be looking for something entirely new?
Well, that's the crux of it. But the argument we're exploring today says no, not at all. In fact, there is a truly compelling defense for it, one that perhaps many have forgotten.
When most of us think of foundational liberal thinkers, our minds often jump straight to the John Locke, Mill, Rawls. They definitely shaped our understanding of rights and liberties. But there are other, maybe less spotlighted thinkers who offer really crucial nuance, a powerful defense, perhaps underappreciated. I'm thinking specifically of the Oxford philosopher Isaiah Berlin and Harvard political theorist Judith Shklar. Bernard Williams, Charles Taylor, too. Their insights feel incredibly relevant right now.
Definitely. And we should probably focus on Isaiah Berlin here. He was, I think, one of the clearest and, greatest defenders of liberal democracy in the 20th century. And his background is really key to understanding his philosophy. He was born to a Jewish family in the Russian Empire. He lived through the most horrific political extremes imaginable, the Russian Revolution, Soviet communism, the Holocaust. This personal experience, understandably, profoundly shaped him. It led to what he called his horror for totalitarian thinking.
Right.
And Berlin's core argument was that the underlying culprit, the sort of intellectual root of totalitarianism, is something he called monism.
Monism. Okay, what does he mean by that?
Monism, for Berlin, is the idea that we can arrive at the true singular answers to humanity's central problems. And then once we have these answers, we can harmoniously combine them into one utopian perfect society, one right way.
Okay, so monism is this belief in one single perfect answer for how society should be. And that belief can be incredibly dangerous. It reminds me of that chilling example from the source article, Stalin's communism. The belief that achieving this supposedly perfect classless society justified killing millions of people. It's such a stark illustration. Berlin had a powerful way of putting that danger, didn't he?
Wow, he absolutely did. There's this famous, really chilling quote he wrote, "For if one really believes that such a solution is possible, then surely no cost would be too high to obtain it. To make mankind just and happy and creative and harmonious forever, what could be too high a price to pay for that?
Wow.
To make such an omelet, there is surely no limit to the number of eggs that should be broken." There was the faith of Lenin, of Trotsky, of Mao.
That omelet line, it just paints such a grim, unforgettable picture.
It really does.
It's a sobering reminder, isn't it, that good intentions, when they're coupled with this absolute certainty about a single perfect answer, can lead to absolute horrors.
Is that the main lesson Berlin wanted us to draw?
Precisely. He considered this utopian monistic idea a dangerous illusion. And what's fascinating here is his core reasoning why it's an illusion. The problem, he argued, is that human beings have many different values. And these values are inherently diverse, they're often in tension, and crucially, they're simply not all compatible. That's Berlin's central argument against monism. Human beings are driven by this multitude of values. And these values aren't just diverse, they frequently clash. They pull in different directions. And often, they are simply incompatible. You can't just pick one and say it's always the best or the only true one.
That's a really profound thought. Can you help us visualize that? Like, what are some everyday examples where values we hold dear actually pull against each other? Oh, absolutely. Think about justice versus mercy. Both are legitimate, deeply admirable values, right?
Sure.
But a really rigorous application of justice might push a court to, throw the book at someone for a minor first offense, even if no real harm was done. While mercy, on the other hand, would urge a more forgiving approach. They pull in different directions. You can't perfectly maximize both in every single situation.
Okay, that makes sense. Or what about liberty versus equality?
Another classic example.
Both are, as Berlin put it, beautiful values. But he also famously wrote, total liberty for wolves is death to the lambs. And also, total liberty of the powerful, the gifted, is not compatible with the rights to a decent existence of the weak and the less gifted. So a state, if it cares about equality or social welfare, feeding the hungry, housing the unhoused, it has to curtail the liberty of those who might dominate or exploit, right?
Exactly. There's a necessary trade-off there.
Right.
You simply cannot have absolute liberty and absolute equality at the same exact time. They
Right.
exist in tension.
Right.
And this leads Berlin to another really core concept he introduced. Incommensurability.
Incommensurability, okay.
Yeah, he argued that values cannot simply be ranked on a single scale, which is something certain ethical theories like, say, utilitarianism try to do. But Berlin argued they ultimately fail.
So putting that in everyday terms, it's like trying to compare the value of, a stunning piece of art to a delicious meal.
That's a good way to think about it.
They're both valuable, sure, but you can't really say one is objectively more valuable than the other using the same yardstick, can you? They offer totally different kinds of fulfillment.
Precisely. The source gives a great example. Imagine a Buddhist meditation retreat versus a slice of really good chocolate cake.
Okay.
Both might bring you happiness, sure, but they are, quote, extremely different types of happiness. You can't rank them on a single scale of happiness units. And furthermore, some things we value, like courage maybe, or intellectual honesty, can actually make us less happy in certain situations. But they're still profoundly valuable. So you just can't boil all these diverse human values down to one single ultimate super value, like happiness or utility, and measure everything against it.
Okay, so values clash. They can't be neatly ranked. So what? What does this mean for society?
Well, the so what is huge. If human values are inherently incommensurable and sometimes flat out incompatible, then it logically follows that no single political arrangement, no matter how well-intentioned or cleverly designed, can possibly satisfy all legitimate human values simultaneously.
We can't have everything.
We simply can't have everything. There will always be trade-offs. And because we're forced to choose between competing goods, there will always be some loss of value involved. Something is always sacrificed.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because Berlin then draws this crucial conclusion from all this. It is precisely because this is the human condition, this constant tension, these necessary trade-offs between legitimate values, that we end up placing such a high premium on freedom. Is that right?
That's exactly it. If no one can justifiably tell us that their way is the one right way to live, because value pluralism fundamentally states there can be more than one right answer, more than one valid way to flourish, then no government, no authority can claim to possess this kind of uncontestable knowledge about the good and then force its singular vision onto all of us.
Oh, okay.
And this connects directly to the foundations of democracy. It implies that we should all have a share in making those collective decisions about the trade-offs we inevitably face, as we do, ideally, in a liberal democracy.
Yeah.
And then on the individual level, it means we should each have the freedom to choose how we balance between competing values and live our own lives according to our own lights.
And crucially, I suppose, when others come up with different answers or balance things differently, we need to respect their competing perspectives. That feels like a huge part of making a pluralistic society actually work, acknowledging that different paths, different choices can still be legitimate, even if they're not ours.
Absolutely fundamental.
Now, okay, a common misunderstanding I can see cropping up here is that value pluralism sounds a bit like relativism. Like, does it just mean anything goes? Does it mean every single value is equally valid, even really harmful ones? Like, is my preference for kindness just, on par with someone else's preference for concentration camps?
Yeah, that's a really important clarification. And Berlin was very, very clear on this distinction. He famously wrote, quote, "I do not say I like my coffee with milk and you like it without. I am in favor of kindness and you prefer concentration camps."
Right.
So while he absolutely argues for a plurality of values, that does not mean that every possible value is a legitimate human value. Legitimate values for Berlin are things that humans have genuine reason to care about as ends in themselves, things that other humans can sort of see the point in, even if they weigh them differently or don't prioritize them themselves.
Okay, so there's a limit.
Exactly. He even offered this interesting thought on the finite nature of these legitimate values. He said something like, the number of values that I can pursue while maintaining my human semblance, my human character, is finite. Let us say 74, or perhaps 122 or 26, but finite, whatever it may be.
He wasn't trying to count them, obviously.
Yeah, not literally.
Yeah.
It was his way of saying that despite our vast differences across cultures and history, there's still a kind of shared human vocabulary of what we fundamentally find valuable. And that shared understanding, that ability to recognize a value, even if we disagree on its weight, is crucial. It's what allows for human understanding across deep differences.
It's really fascinating how this connects to modern psychology, isn't it? Like, think about Jonathan Haidt's research on moral foundations theory. He found that people seem to prioritize different moral values. Liberals, for instance, often score high on care and fairness. Conservatives might also emphasize loyalty, authority, sanctity. And the crucial point Haidt makes, which seems very Berlin-esque, is that it's not like some of these are inherently bad and others are good. They're just different, deeply held, legitimate values that humans seem wired to recognize.
Yes, that's a great connection.
So you could, for example, appreciate sanctity as a legitimate human value, recognize its inherent pull for some people. Even if you profoundly disagree with how, say, a conservative might apply that value to a specific issue like abortion. It's about seeing the human impulse behind it, even if your interpretation or application is wildly different.
Right. And Berlin really anticipated this kind of thinking. While he certainly acknowledged that some disagreements are just too severe, that people will feel compelled to fight, he himself said he would have gone to war against Nazi Germany, for instance. He generally believed that, quote, respect between systems of values which are not necessarily hostile to each other is possible. We can understand, even if we don't agree.
Okay, so Berlin's analysis, this value pluralism, it gives us this incredibly effective vaccine against totalitarian thinking, as the article puts it. It strongly justifies what he called negative freedoms, basically. Freedom from oppression, freedom from interference. That's a massive point in its favor, and definitely something worth remembering now. But is that all there is to building a good society? Does focusing just on freedom from things account for everything we want? What about opportunities, well-being, connection?
That's a really critical point to bring up. And critics have, quite fairly, I think, argued that Berlin and maybe other Cold War liberals sometimes neglected what are called positive freedoms.
Positive freedoms,
Yeah.
meaning...
Meaning the freedom to enjoy good things in life, the freedom to participate fully, to have opportunities to actually thrive, not just be left alone.
Right.
And, it's arguably a fair critique. You could say American liberalism, in practice, has done a relatively poor job of ensuring things like genuine equality of opportunity or fostering widespread social connection for everyone. We see the results of that.
So does Berlin's value pluralism offer any way to address those gaps? Or is it purely a defense against the worst outcomes, against totalitarianism?
Yeah.
Does it give us some kind of timeless blueprint for how to prioritize everything?
Well, actually, Berlin's account of value pluralism was much more nuanced than suggesting a single, timeless prescription for balancing priorities. In fact, you could say it was the exact opposite.
How so?
He strongly emphasized that priorities are never absolute or fixed forever. Society, he kind of argued, exists on a sort of seesaw. As concrete circumstances change, the example given is, say, as capitalism goes into hyperdrive and billionaires amass more and more power, we constantly need to readjust our stance. We have to keep tweaking things to try and maintain a decent balance among all the different elements of a good life. It's this dynamic, ongoing process of adjustment, not a static solution you find once and lock in.
So it's always about recalibrating based on the current reality.
Exactly. And he expanded this idea to the global scale, too. Berlin fully expected different cultures to continue disagreeing, perhaps forever, on exactly how much weight to put on various legitimate human values. And he urged us to view each culture not as wrong, necessarily, but as infinitely precious in its uniqueness. To see that there might be, quote, as many types of perfection as there are types of culture.
That feels like a profoundly positive vision, actually. It moves beyond just grudging tolerance towards genuinely respecting, maybe even, as the article says, delighting in difference.
It does. It opens up that possibility.
Appreciating the diverse ways humans can find meaning and structure their societies.
And it's very much an ongoing project. You have a new generation of philosophers. Now the article mentions American thinkers influenced by Berlin, like Ruth Chang and Elizabeth Anderson, who are actively trying to work out the particulars. How do we apply these core ideas of value, pluralism, and necessary trade-offs to really complex modern issues like ongoing racial segregation or the incredibly rapid changes brought by new technologies?
Okay, so to try and bring this all back as we wrap up, the core takeaway from this deep dive, drawing on that Vox article, seems to be this. Value pluralism provides a really robust, intellectually serious defense for liberal democracy, one that doesn't shy away from complexity, tension, and the constant need for societal adjustment and balancing. It's not about finding that one perfect singular answer because that doesn't exist. It's about how we manage the inevitable tensions and make those difficult but necessary choices together.
That sums it up well. And, thinking about what this means for you, the listener, the article really ends with something like a call to action. It suggests that if America or any society is going to remain a functioning liberal democracy, it's not just work for philosophers or political theorists.
Right. It implies it's about everyday Americans, everyday citizens remembering the value of value pluralism itself. So maybe the provocative thought to leave you with is this. As you go about your week, think about how this core concept, acknowledging legitimate yet often conflicting values, might shift how you approach disagreements. Not just in politics, but maybe in your own life, your family, your community, your workplace. What if we all approached our differences, even the really tough ones, with that deeper understanding that there might be multiple valid perspectives in play, rooted in values we can at least recognize, even if we don't share the same priorities? How might that change the conversation?